Now, internationally acclaimed leadership expert and author John C. Maxwell is in Ghana for a leadership conference. Ahead of that, host of the Super Morning Show on Joy FM, Daniel Dazi, speaks to him on a variety of issues, including the current debates on regulating the churches. Enjoy the conversation.
One of the world's greatest paradoxes is that Africa has 30% of the Earth's remaining mineral resources, but has over 400 million people living in poverty. Ghana, for instance, is the world's largest exporter of gold, but we are still grappling with basic issues like sanitation and public transformation. So, is the paradox of Africa a leadership challenge? And where must we begin if we want to transform our continent and our lives? Thankfully, my guest today is an expert on leadership. He's been teaching about leadership for about 40 years. He has some 77 books in print, 24 million copies already sold, and he needs no further introduction. His name is John C. Maxwell. Sir, thank you very much for your time.
It's my pleasure, Daniel. Good to be with you and all of your people.
First of all, congratulations on the 50th wedding anniversary. It was just last week, we understand.
That's right. You just have to be old.
Okay, it's something I can aspire to, if
there
that's all it takes. Okay, in the first place, you've done this, you've been teaching for 40 years, you've been married for 50 years, you've been alive for 72 years. How did this journey begin?
It was a calling for me. When I was in my middle 20s, I really sensed that my calling in life would be to train and develop leaders, and so because I'm so convinced that everything rises and falls on leadership, and that's true in government, that's true in education, that's true in religion, that's true in business. Everything rises and falls on leadership. I committed my life to helping people learn how to lead, because if they can learn how to lead, things will get better for themselves, and even more importantly, things will get better for the people that they lead. So yes, for almost 50 years now, I've been committed to just developing and training leaders and watching them, once they learn how to lead, be more successful in their personal life and also help their people be more successful.
So how did you discover that it is leadership that will help people be more successful?
Well, I was at a very young age, I was very successful. I was a pastor, okay? And by the time I was 28, I had the 10th largest church in America. And people came to me and said, John, how did you do this? And I really didn't know, so I kind of went on a little bit of a reflective inventory of my life, and I came to the conclusion that I really was a good leader, that I knew how to lead well, and that then if I could teach other people to lead well, I could help them. And so after a few years, I came to the conclusion through history, through current events, of watching people that had good leadership do well and flourish, and people who had bad leadership not do well. And I finally came to the conclusion, which has been substantiated all these years now. In fact, there isn't anybody I've ever known that would ever refute the idea everything rises and falls on leadership. And when leadership's good, good things happen. When leadership's bad, bad things happen.
You've answered my next question for me, but I want you to shed some more light on it, because I keep coming back to that statement. Everything rises and falls on leadership. What does it mean?
Well, it also means it falls. I mean, you know, in other words, the greatest blessing for a group of people is to have a good leader, because good things will happen to them. The biggest curse in people's life is to have a bad leader, because bad things will happen to them. And one of the first things a leader understands is that he or she is not only responsible for their life, but for the life of so many other people. And so leaders are either the best thing that's happening to a group of people, or, to be honest with you, they're the worst thing that's happening to a group of people, so that it can rise but also can fall if the leadership is not good.
A lot of people have different ideas about it, but what would you say makes a good leader?
Well, a good leader, it begins with character, being the right person on the inside. Now, I want to be very clear. Having good character doesn't mean that you're a good leader. I know a lot of people have just good character, they're just good people. I mean, it takes leadership skills to be a good leader also. But so I always say character won't make you a great leader as far as develop your leadership skills, but what it will do is it'll keep you from being a bad leader, because you show me a bad leader and I'll show you a person who has inside problems that show up on the outside. It's a character issue.
So I began by talking about the paradox of Africa. A lot of people say it's a leadership challenge, not a development challenge. Do you agree?
Well, it's both. I think it's a leadership challenge. Africa has a huge leader. They don't have near enough what I would call really good leaders. But it's also a development challenge. And let me explain it by this way. One of the common problems I find in this continent is that once a person gets in a leadership position, instead of developing and empowering other people, they hold to the power themselves. In other words, they know that if they have power, they have control. And so therefore, they don't develop other leaders. They don't empower other people. Africa doesn't have what I call an empowering leadership culture. It has a follow me culture. I'm the leader, you're not, do what I say. And so therefore, we have people hopelessly in line, waiting for a leader to make a decision of which, if the people were empowered, they could make it much better, much quicker, and help themselves. But I find that in Africa, many of the leaders hold on to power, gather power, control power, and just don't train and develop the people. And so therefore, everybody waits on the leader to do something, and if it's good, it's a good thing. If it's bad, it's a bad thing.
Or they wait to occupy that position before they can do something themselves.
Yes, yeah. If I ever become a leader, I'm going to do something wonderful for Africa, and I tell a person, you can do something wonderful for Africa today. You don't have to wait until you quote have a leadership position. But in this culture, the position of leadership is confused with leadership. It's possible to have the position of a leader and yet not be a good leader at all. And so it's kind of like, wow, I've got a leadership position, so you have to follow me. And I say, no, that's not a reason to follow somebody that's a leader. You follow somebody that's a leader because they're helping you and they're adding value to you and they're making things better. That's why you follow leadership. And Africa is way too position conscious and not near enough development conscious. And so if we don't have the position, we just say, well, I can do nothing about it. And that never helps the culture or the society. And if we do have the position, all of a sudden, we want to hoard it and hold it onto it and control it instead of letting everybody else learn how to lead and sharing that power and allowing people to help raise themselves up to a great extent.
I love how you bring it back to a shared responsibility. On my show, we often talk about striking the balance between citizens' responsibility and what leaders must do. Can you comment on that for me?
Well, I think that I think the best leadership is always leadership at the lowest level possible, not the highest level possible. And so let's take in a village or a community in Africa, in Ghana. If that community has good leadership, the people in that little town, they're just going to be so much better off. The challenge is, again, you have too few leaders and you empower the few leaders too much. And so the rest of the people sit idly by, hoping that a leadership decision from somewhere on top is going to have a positive effect on their life. That does not work that way. And so what we've discovered, we've trained, I'm the largest equipping leadership training organization in the world. We've trained 6 million leaders in every country of the world. So we understand training, we understand empowerment. And the first thing that we do to empower and train a leader isn't to talk to them about what they do. It's to talk to them about who they are. Who they are determines what you do. If I'm good on the inside, I'll do good things on the outside. And to be honest with you, if I'm bad on the inside, I'll be bad on the outside. I'll do bad things. And so we go for values. I mean, I've written a lot of leadership books, and people ask me sometimes, John, what's the first leadership book I should read? And I say, well, maybe the 21 Qualities of a Leader, because what you want to do is you want to strive to be the right person before you can do the right things. And this is totally missed. Totally missed. It's not about who you are. It's about who you know and what you do, and it's horrible, and it's never going to work. It never has worked. It isn't going to work. And here's what's sad to me. In Africa, you've got these great resources, incredible. I mean, you are amazingly blessed. I mean, you talked about Ghana and gold and exportation. Okay, here's what's sad. The resources that you have, which are, so very valuable, are being placed ahead of the biggest resource that you have, and that's your people. And your people are your greatest asset if they are trained and equipped and developed well. Much greater than your natural resources. And yet, when I see Africa, I see great natural resources, and yet the people themselves are never developed to reach their potential. And I think it's just, I think it's a miss. And again, you've got to value your people as a leader. When a leader doesn't value people, instead of motivating them, they manipulate them, and that's what I see constantly. When manipulation is nothing more than a result of me valuing myself as a leader more than I value you, Daniel. If I'm in a leadership position, I have control. If I don't have good values in my life, I'm going to take advantage of you. I'm going to use you to enrich me instead of what leaders should be doing, and that is enriching their people, adding value to their people. And so that's why I truly believe until Ghana, Africa, any other country, America, it doesn't matter what country, until we understand that we start with values and we build leaders by building the inside. We want them to be bigger on the inside than they are on the outside. Let me explain something to you. If you're bigger on the inside than you're on the outside, it's only a matter of time till you become big on the outside. If you're smaller on the inside than you're on the outside, it's only a matter of time till you get smaller on the outside.
Wow, that's something I'm definitely sharing whenever I have the opportunity. But one institution that really looks at building people is the church, and Ghanaians like church. 71% of us are Christian. However, a lot of complaints come that it doesn't match our levels of corruption and our economic management.
Well, perhaps the saddest picture I have of not only Ghana or any country, forget just Ghana, is there a sadder picture than Christians that don't have values above those who are not Christ followers? I mean, when you look at Christ, one, he valued people. I mean, he valued everybody. And he taught great values to us. He said, in fact, he said, if we do it right, we're to be salt and light. We're to make things better. We're to make things brighter. But the moment that I'm corrupt, I don't make things better. I don't make things brighter. We're to be our brother's keeper. We're to have the golden rule. All the principles that we're taught in faith, when we begin to be corrupt, we ignore. And we don't live them out. And so, to me, the greatest blight, perhaps on the country, is the fact that Christians aren't salt and light. There's nothing contagious about them. There's nothing appetizing. They're not set apart. They're not different in a way that other people could say, wow, I would like to live that kind of a life. And so therefore, no credibility, no moral authority. And so our authority is in our name or our title or our position, not in who we are. That's very sad.
Speaking of authorities, we've had Christian leaders themselves being involved in financial transactions that have raised questions. And some have even said that, look, Christian leaders should not venture into business if they're in ministry in the first place. What are your thoughts on that?
Christians should do the right thing. Period. Just period. It's like in America. Back in the late 1990s, if you can remember, there was the Enron scandal and all the corporations that were basically doing wrong things. And so I was asked by my publisher to write a book on business ethics. You know, I said, John, I want you to write this book on business ethics. We'll push it. And I said, I can't do that. He said, why? I said, because there's no such thing. There's no such thing as business ethics. And he countered back. He said, what do you mean? Look at all the companies that are doing the wrong thing and corrupt. I said, no, excuse me. There's no such thing as business ethics. There's just ethics. Period. You either have them or you don't. No more story. You see, if I have them, it'll work in every area of my life. And if I don't have them, it won't work.
Even if you're a pastor?
Even if you're a pastor. Has nothing to do with being a pastor. Outside of having a position or title as a pastor, you have no more rights than anyone else except to serve people. Totally. Again, when my position allows me to think that I can now do what I want and what's best for me instead of what's best for the people. I mean, you know, what did Jesus say? Jesus said, don't lord it over people, serve the people. And Jesus taught servant leadership. That's what he taught. If he were to define, if he were on your program right now and you asked Jesus define leadership, he'd say leadership is servant leadership. Well, I don't see servant leadership among most pastors and leaders. I see self-leadership. What's best for me and what can I get for myself? And the people aren't any better off at all, and it just leaves a blight on leadership. It leaves a blight on faith in the Christian community, and it's wrong. It's, you know, it's pathetic. It's, you know, you can't rationalize that away. You know, a crook is a crook. If you know, there's one guy may stand and say I'm a crook, and there may be another person say, well, I'm a pastor. But if you're a crook, you're a crook. You just happen to have a different title, but you're still a crook.
Finally, Mr. Maxwell, before you go, because we know you're a very busy man, what's your message for the country and the continent?
Well, my life message is I add value to leaders who multiply value to others. If I can speak to the right people, leaders, they have tremendous influence over everyone else. So I influence the masses through leaders. And so my message is very simple. Leadership is important. My message for Ghana is that if you really want your country changed, you're going to have to embrace good values and live them out. And we do that in countries now. We have invitations in 22 countries from the president of the country to come in and teach leadership values. Because again, the only way that you can bring good change to any country is not through legislation. If legislation would have brought change, we'd already had it. It's not through title, position, power, authority, government. Those things aren't working. I mean, when are we going to open our eyes and say they don't work? It's only going to happen when people embrace good values. The moment that I learn good values and live them, then I become more valuable to myself, to you, to my neighbor, to my country. Everybody wins the moment I embrace good values. So my message for Ghana is very simple. If you want positive change, then start with values and begin to practice and live out those values. That'll bring the change you need, the positive change.
Thank you very, very much.
Thank you
for joining us, Dr. Maxwell.
Good to be with you, Daniel.
Good to have you too. So that's Dr. John Maxwell, who taught us some lessons. I hope it has blessed you as much as it has blessed me. Stay with us.
Yeah, certainly those lessons will stay with us for a very long time. Here's one that I picked though. Having a good character doesn't make one a great leader. It's very deep, one for all of us to reflect on. Another quotable quote from John C. Maxwell, Doctor. All right, when we come back, it's our Healthy Thursday conversation. Remember what we talked about last Thursday, all in the spirit of Father's Day. We will check on you to see how much of the things Dr. Akama said you actually did. And I know some people were struggling to get through the phone lines last week. So who knows, we'll just probably spend just a little time on it today. But today we're also discussing 5 ways to maintain a healthy heart with our resident doctor, Dr. Joseph Akama. He's head of cardiology, University of Ghana. Stay with us. When we come back, that conversation will be underway.